The hospital called it a miracle match. I called it the moment my marriage ended. I was standing in a hallway that smelled like hand sanitizer and old coffee, holding my phone so tight my knuckles had gone white, and the transplant coordinator was saying words like excellent compatibility and close biological relative, like they were good news. And for about 4 seconds, they were. For 4 seconds, I was just a mother whose daughter might actually live. Then she said one more sentence, almost as an afterthought, and that sentence is the reason I'm telling you this story instead of just living my life. But you need the beginning first. You need to understand who we were before you understand how far we fell. My name is Rachel. I was married to David for 12 years. And for 11 of those years, I would have told you, without hesitating, that he was a good man. Our daughter Emma was 7 when the bruises started. Not the kind from falling off a bike, the kind that showed up on her shins and her back for no reason at all, dark and spreading, like her body had started keeping secrets from her. Then the exhaustion. She'd fall asleep at the dinner table. She'd cry from tired legs after walking half a block. I remember the pediatrician's face when she looked at Emma's blood work. She didn't say anything alarming out loud. She just said, very carefully, "I want to send you to a specialist today, not next week, today." That's how you know, before anyone tells you anything. The word today does all the talking. The specialist said aplastic anemia. Emma's bone marrow had stopped making the cells her body needed to survive. Not enough platelets, not enough white cells, not enough of anything. He explained it slowly, like he'd said it 1,000 times to 1,000 terrified parents, and somewhere in the middle of his explanation, I stopped hearing individual words and just heard one idea over and over. My daughter's body was quietly failing, and there was very little time to fix it. The only real cure was a bone marrow transplant, and the only way to get one was to find a match. David sat next to me in that office with his hand wrapped tightly around mine, and I remember focusing on the pressure of his grip, because it was the only thing keeping me anchored in that room instead of floating somewhere above it. I want to be honest with you about something. In the months that followed, David was, by every measure I had, exactly the husband you'd want in that situation. He drove Emma to every appointment. He learned the names of every medication before I did. He sat up with her on the nights the fevers came, singing songs off key until she fell asleep. And then he'd come find me in the kitchen and just hold me while I cried into his shoulder, not saying anything because there wasn't anything to say. None of us were a match. Not me, not David. Siblings are usually the best chance, and Emma didn't have any. So we went on the national registry and we waited. Months of waiting. Months of a phone that didn't ring, and a daughter who got a little weaker every week, and a husband who held my hand in waiting rooms so many times that I stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. I remember one night in particular, maybe 4 months in. Emma had spiked a fever again, low but stubborn, and we'd spent the evening in the ER just to be safe. On the drive home, David pulled into a gas station, and I watched him sit in the parked car for a full minute before coming inside, both hands on the wheel, just breathing. When he finally came in, his eyes were red, and he said, "I keep thinking there's something I'm supposed to be doing that I'm not doing." I told him he was doing everything right. I meant it. I had no idea, sitting in that gas station lot, that the thing he wasn't doing had a name and a birthday and was living 3 states away. There was another night I think about now too. Emma had asked, out of nowhere, whether she'd ever have a brother or sister, the way kids do when they're bored and scared and looking for something normal to talk about. David had gone very quiet before answering her, quieter than the question seemed to call for, and said, "Maybe someday, baby." At the time, I read it as grief. We'd talked about a second child years earlier and let the idea go. Looking back, I think it was something closer to guilt wearing grief's clothes. I tell you all of this so that you understand. Nothing about David gave me a single reason to look twice at him. He was not a man I was watching. He was a man I was leaning on. Then, in March, the call came. I picked up expecting another update, another form to sign, another small disappointment dressed up as hope. Instead, the coordinator's voice had something in it I hadn't heard in months, an actual smile, audible through the phone. "We found a match," she said, "a very strong one. 98% compatibility. This is about as good as it gets." I sat down right there on the kitchen floor because my legs simply stopped being legs. I was laughing and crying at the same time, the kind of sound that doesn't have a name, and I was already calling for David, already picturing Emma running again, riding her bike again, being 7 years old again instead of being sick. And then, because these things are procedural, because there are always more details, the coordinator kept talking. She mentioned that in cases of a match this strong, it's not uncommon for the donor to be a close biological relative, especially on cases like this one. And this donor, she said, was on Emma's paternal side. I said, "That's not possible. My husband doesn't have any siblings. He's an only child." There was a small pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that isn't empty. It's full of things a person isn't allowed to say. "I'm not able to discuss donor details," she said carefully. "I just wanted to prepare you in case it comes up later in the process." I told her thank you. I told her we were thrilled. And I hung up the phone and sat on my kitchen floor in the exact same spot, except now something in my chest had gone very still and very cold, the way water goes right before it freezes. Paternal side. Close biological relative. David is an only child. I didn't say anything to him that night. I want you to understand that. I didn't accuse him. I didn't ask him a single pointed question. I told him the wonderful news, and I watched him cry with relief, real relief, the kind you can't fake, and some small, desperate part of me thought, there has to be an explanation. A cousin, a half-sibling he doesn't even know about. Anything. I just couldn't stop turning that sentence over. Close biological relative. Paternal side. The registry wouldn't tell me who the donor was. Privacy laws, they said, over and over, no matter how many times I called back with a different version of the same question. So I stopped asking them, and I started asking my own life instead. It's strange, the things you remember once you start looking for them on purpose. I remembered a city David used to travel to for work, back before Emma was born, back before we were even married. A consulting contract that used to take him away 2, sometimes 3 times a year, always the same city, always for about a week. I remembered a receipt I'd found once in an old coat pocket, years ago, from a restaurant in that city, and how I'd asked about it, and he'd said easily, "Team dinner probably," and I'd believed him because there was no reason not to. I told myself I was just being thorough, not suspicious. That's the lie you tell yourself while you're going through your husband's things at 11 at night with your daughter asleep down the hall. I found an old box of his things in the garage. Tax documents, expired passports, things from before we met. My hands were shaking hard enough that I dropped the lid twice before I finally got it open. And in that box, folded into a manila envelope I almost didn't open, I found a birth certificate. A boy, born 12 years ago in that same city. Father's name, David. I sat on the concrete floor of our garage holding a piece of paper that told me my husband had a son the same age as our marriage, and I understood all at once that the affair, because that's what this was, there was no gentler word for it, hadn't happened after we got married. It had happened right before. Right when he was supposed to be building a life with me, he was starting one with someone else too. I kept looking. I don't know what I expected to find that would make it hurt less. Instead, I found more. Buried in an online banking app I'd never had a reason to open, under a savings sub-account labeled, almost cruelly, MISC. There were transfers going out every single month. Small ones, $300-$400. Going out every month for 12 years, disguised in 12 years of budgets and statements I never had a reason to question because I trusted him. 12 years of quiet payments. 12 years of a woman who knew exactly who my husband was, while I only knew the version he let me see. I didn't confront him right away. I sat with it for 2 days, which were maybe the longest 2 days of my life, because I had to keep functioning, keep taking Emma to her appointments, keep smiling, keep being a person, while carrying a truth that was slowly rearranging every memory I had of my own marriage. On the third night, after Emma was asleep, I put the birth certificate and a printout of the bank transfers on our kitchen table, side by side, and I called David in. I watched his face change in real time. First confusion, then something collapsing behind his eyes, like a building coming down floor by floor. He didn't ask what it was. He already knew. He sat down across from me, and he told me, slowly, like each sentence cost him something physical to say. It started before we were engaged, he said. A woman from the consulting job. It ended, he swore it ended, before our wedding. But she got pregnant, and she told him, and he made a choice right there that he never told me about. He chose to stay. He chose me, he said, like that was supposed to sound like loyalty instead of the opposite. He sent money every month because it was the right thing to do for the boy, he said. He never met him in person more than a handful of times over all those years. He told himself it wasn't lying, just not telling. And then he said the thing that broke something in me for good. He said that when I told him I was pregnant with Emma, he thought about telling me the truth then, standing right in our old kitchen, and he decided that burying it was easier than losing everything he'd already built with me. Easier for him? Not for me. Not for Emma, who was now lying in a hospital bed needing a piece of the brother she didn't know she had. The boy's name is Caleb. He's turning 12 this year. 12 years old, the exact number of years David and I have been married. He had been quietly living an entire life, a few states away, this whole time, while I sat across from David at 1,000 dinners, married to a story that wasn't true. I wish I could tell you I threw him out that night. Some part of me wanted to. But Emma's life was sitting on the other side of this, a boy she'd never met carried inside his body, the one thing that could save her. and I had to hold both truths at once. My husband had lied to me for 12 years, and his lie had produced the only chance my daughter had left. Telling my family was its own kind of unraveling. My mother went completely silent on the phone, the kind of silence that says more than shouting ever could. And then, after almost 30 seconds, she said only, 12 years. Like she was doing the math out loud, like she needed to hear herself say the number before she could believe it. My sister wanted to drive over immediately and take Emma and me somewhere else, anywhere else. And when I told her I couldn't leave, that Emma still needed the transplant, still needed David's cooperation to make it happen, she went quiet too, because she understood, the way I was starting to understand, that hating him and needing him were going to have to live in the same house for a while. David's own parents cried when they found out, not for him, but for Emma, and for the grandson they never got to know existed. His mother asked me, through tears, if she could see a photo of the boy. I didn't have one. I still don't. Not really. Just the version of him I've built in my head out of a birth certificate and 12 years of hidden bank transfers. A boy I have never met who is, in every way that matters, the reason my daughter is still breathing. The transplant happened 6 weeks later. Caleb's mother agreed to it without hesitation. She told me, through a message David passed along, because I wasn't ready to speak to her directly, that Caleb wanted to do it the moment he understood a little girl needed him. Emma is doing well now. Her counts came back strong. She's riding her bike again, exactly like I used to picture in that hospital hallway, except the version of my life I'm living now looks nothing like the one I imagined that day. She doesn't know the whole story yet, just that a very brave boy helped save her, and that someday, when she's older, we'll tell her more. I don't know yet what more is going to sound like, coming out of my mouth to my own daughter. David and I are not together anymore. Not really. We haven't filed anything final, because there's a boy now tied to my daughter's survival, and untangling that isn't as simple as untangling a marriage. He sees Emma every week. He sleeps at his brother's place now, and picks her up on Wednesdays and every other weekend. And for a long time, I couldn't stand to be in the same room when he came to the door. Some weeks, I still see him standing a little too long in our driveway, like he's waiting for something I'm not ready to give him. An answer maybe, or forgiveness, or just permission to stop feeling like the villain in his own daughter's recovery story. I've caught myself, more than once, almost reaching for his hand out of 12 years of habit before remembering why I can't. Old marriages don't leave your body just because you've decided to leave the marriage. A few months ago, I ran into Caleb's mother in a hospital hallway, of all places. Some follow-up appointment, some waiting room neither of us expected to share. We didn't say much. She looked at me the way you look at someone who understands exactly what you've survived, even if you got there by very different roads. We didn't have to explain anything to each other. We just knew. I think about that hallway a lot. The first one, back in March, when a stranger's kind voice told me my daughter had a miracle waiting for her, and I had no idea the miracle came wrapped in a lie I'd have to spend the rest of my life carrying. So I'll ask you what I still ask myself some nights, when the house is quiet and Emma is finally safely asleep. Would you let the man who lied to you for 12 years still be in your daughter's life, if his lie was the reason she's alive?